And with that, a very warm welcome, good morning slash good afternoon, depending on where you're based, to this webinar that I have to say, I am super excited to run. Are you doing Kirkpatrick right? I've been using myself the Kirkpatrick model for a very, very long time. Though I have to admit, I've been using the correct Kirkpatrick model since the beginning. I actually didn't even really know there was a different version or one that somehow seems to be more frequently used or available. But I am very, very excited to kind of, together with my colleague Preeti, shed some light on what does it really take to use the Kirkpatrick model correctly, to really derive value from it, and also just bust some general myths and misconceptions that exist around it. So, Preeti, do you want to just take a moment to introduce yourself before we're going to jump right in?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Great to meet all of you. Thank you for joining in today. We are so excited to run this session today. Like Melanie, I also have been associated with Kirkpatrick for a very long time. But unlike her, I did use it in a wrong way before I got introduced to the right way. And when I did, I realized there were so many things that could be done so differently. So I'm very happy to be here to share my experiences of how I shifted, what turned around, and happy to be here again. Go ahead, Melanie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And by the way, yeah, I didn't really introduce myself. So, of course, you can see my name is Melanie. And I am the owner of Going Beyond Training, the Kirkpatrick affiliate, especially for the APAC region, but we also run the program in the German language. And I also have the honor and privilege to very closely work with someone who's actually on the call today as well, Dr. Ina Weinbauer-Heidel from the Institute of Transfer Effectiveness, where I also work as a senior transfer enabler. So, enough said though, let's jump right in and actually get you involved. Some of you might have seen me post about this online and kind of sharing that I'm really excited to launch this poll, which I've just done. Yeah, so this is my moment where I would invite you to share with us what do you think? Is this indeed the Kirkpatrick model? I'm going to give you a moment to vote. Okay. I was curious to see what comes out of here. And I know you as
Yay.
well, Preeti. Just going to
Interesting
give it
mix.
another, like maybe 10 seconds. So if you haven't yet voted, this is your chance, the final 10 seconds before I'm going to close this. Okay. Good. Well, looks like even though I have kind of started to allude to this, maybe even, in my LinkedIn post and even now in the introductions, it still is the way I expected that the majority of us, and let me actually broadcast this, do believe that this is the Kirkpatrick model. And I'm very sorry for all of you. This is kind of like the moment where you tell your child there is no Easter Bunny, there's no Father Christmas. This is not the Kirkpatrick model. It is not. It is, though, the most often representation and visual of the Kirkpatrick model, but it is not the correct Kirkpatrick model, how it is intended to be used, how we are using it, how at Kirkpatrick models we are teaching it. However, I do agree with the majority of you. This is when you go into Google, but again, that also just tells you don't trust everything that you find on the internet. This is the most common representation of the Kirkpatrick model. And it's actually also, unfortunately, the number one reason why most people struggle using the model. While there's actually also sometimes a lot of negative words out there. Oh, the Kirkpatrick model doesn't work. Oh, yeah, I'm with you. If this is how you use it, if this is how you look at the model, it is definitely not going to work. And we'll tell you in a moment a little bit more. But before I go there, Preeti, just curious. I mean, this is kind of the number one myth
Yeah.
that this pyramid going from reaction to learning behavior and results is the Kirkpatrick model. And you've been working with so many clients across the globe on evaluation. Are there some other major misconceptions or myths that you have come across in your work?
Yeah, so many, but the top one has always been that we need to start thinking about evaluation after the program's run. So there was a request, we ran a program, and 6 months later or 3 months later, we start to think about evaluation. I think today we are going to realize that that's not the perhaps best way of doing things. I think that has been one of the biggest issues in the industry where we've thought of evaluation far too late and we are not able
Hmm.
to do anything about it. And I think that myth needs to be busted right out completely.
Well, you've just given me a beautiful segue, and that was not even planned
Ah, there you
to
go.
actually kind of our next aspect. So, I know, and we're going to show you, yeah, those of you now already curious. So, what is then the Kirkpatrick model? What does it look like? We will get there in a moment. But before that, I just want to keep busting a few other myths. So, in a moment, we're going to help you really understand the Kirkpatrick model, and we're going to go step by step through the different levels. And Preeti is then going to nicely bring all of it together and reveal to us what the actual Kirkpatrick model looks like. But before that, I have another question for you in a poll. Preeti in a moment is going to explain to us the different levels of Kirkpatrick. And let's take a guess in terms of which level is she actually gonna start with. So let me see. Okay, so I'm gonna launch another poll, and this question is, what do you think? Which level do you think you should consider first when designing or modifying a program? Basically, with which level of the Kirkpatrick model should we start? And I know we haven't yet really explained all the levels, so don't worry about it, but just kind of looking at the visual, looking at what you see on the slide and just your own experience, what do you feel is the correct order how we start? Okay. Just going to give it another moment. Lots of voting coming in. Just going to give you another 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end it and I'm going to project it. And yay, at least here we got it right. So this is, and actually interestingly, it is very often people do think you start with level one because that old visual of that pyramid, at the very bottom, you have level one. But as Preeti kind of alluded to, that's actually another very big myth where people think evaluation only starts after the program. And yes, after the program, we'll talk more about it. Of course, when you start collecting data, you'll probably start first collecting level one data. But Kirkpatrick is not only an evaluation model. Kirkpatrick is a design model. It's a planning model. And we actually need to start with level four. If we want to use the model correctly, one of the key things is to start with level four. Why that is and how to do that, I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a moment. But before that, I think it's maybe time, Preeti, that we actually explain those levels in a little bit more detail, just to make sure we all have the same understanding.
Agree with you, Melanie. So let's talk about each of those. So you said we should start with level four, and that's exactly what we're doing. We are starting with level four results. So the definition of it is the degree to which targeted program outcomes occur and contribute to the organization highest level result. What we mean here is that there are certain outcomes that are expected from any training program. Now, are these outcomes actually contributing to the overall good of the organization? When we say the organization highest level result, we are talking almost about the mission statement. We are talking about the mission statement of the organization, thinking about what is it that the organization exists to do? What is the purpose of the organization? And is the program that we're running, the intervention that we're running, actually contributing to that? Now, very often there is the thought that, hey, I'm going to run a program, say, on communication. How is that going to lead to the mission of the organization? And that's where you start to look at metrics within the organization, things like customer satisfaction, maybe call response rate, or how quick are we resolving issues, or employee metrics that we are looking at, saying, are employees actually happy? Are they engaged? Is attrition reducing? So all of that really is what we are trying to see with level 4, saying the intervention that we ran, how is it reflecting at those levels of metrics? So that's level 4 in a brief nutshell for you. Now, level 3 is all about taking the learning that they have, which we'll talk about, and applying it on the job. So how are people starting to behave differently? So the degree to which participants apply what they learned during training when they are back on the job. So often, training just becomes about learning and not really contributing to behavior change on the job, or we are not really tracking, we are not checking. There are companies who say that, hey, we are doing level 3, we are sending a survey 60 days down the line, 90 days down the line to check whether behaviors happen. We don't know whether that's really the case because we aren't really supporting it. So the idea with behavior is that we ensure that whatever the participants learn actually gets applied back on the job. There is a specific way of writing behaviors. You have to really think about how to craft them and then get people to start applying those behaviors. Level 2 is all about the learning. So the degree to which participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, but what we are adding is attitude, confidence, and commitment based on their participation in the training. So it's not just about whether I learned what I needed to learn, whether I'm able to apply some of what I learned in the training program itself, but also as a participant, what attitude do I have? Do I think that this is all worth it? Do I feel confident that when I go back, I will be able to apply some of it? Do I feel committed? Do I feel like I actually am going to take this back and apply it on the job? These three really are what we call as little bridges that we have to level 3 behavior. Because sometimes level 2 might occur, learning might occur, but hey, behavior is not changing on the job. And we are not sure why. If we will go back and check on the attitude, confidence, and commitment, sometimes we'll get our answers as to why that's not changing. So that's why these three are important elements of level 2. And finally, level 1, reaction, the degree to which participants find the training favorable, engaging, and relevant. Relevant is definitely a key one here. Do participants find that the content that we are giving to them is actually something that's relatable to them? Sometimes they, you always hear these things. What you learned is training is one thing, but what in reality is different. Then clearly that content wasn't very relevant to them. So how can we as facilitators think about relevance is important. It is important, of course, that participants do feel happy and satisfied at the end of it. But most importantly, because if they don't find it relevant, they're not going to learn so much. And if they're not learning, the other two levels are certainly not going to happen. So that's level 1 reaction for you. Now, these are the 4 levels in a nutshell, but hey, this is the Kirkpatrick model. The pyramid image that you saw had elements of it, but it didn't have all the details of the Kirkpatrick model. So this model has been in existence for quite a while now. And what it does is it really brings to life what we mean when we talk about Kirkpatrick. And how we evaluate with it. And that's why Melanie said this is also a design methodology, because we really think it through from the day one. So when there is a training need and people are saying we want some training, we start to ask them why. What is it that you are hoping to achieve? What organizational problem are you trying to solve? If this intervention did occur, how is it going to impact the organization in the long run? So in terms of the organizational outcomes, what's going to happen in terms of the mission statement? Are we going to contribute to that mission statement? And if we feel that the mission statement is too far and too big, What initiative outcomes are you looking at? What would be smaller term metrics that I can start to measure that will tell me that things are going in the right direction? Because the more we think about those metrics, which will happen, say, immediately after the program, 3 months after the program, 6 months after the program, a year after the program, those are all your leading indicators, which are eventually leading to the mission outcome. The other thing there is the critical behaviors, the level 3 behaviors, which is this big green circle in the middle, and it's surrounded by another circle which says required drivers, which are really support mechanisms. And we talk about those in a little bit detail later, but it's important to identify some behaviors. Before I go on, I do want to check with you. Are you noticing anything about the model? Is there anything that's standing out for you as you're watching this model, this image? Anything that stands out? You can put your thoughts in chat if you like.
Yeah, it's actually a great idea, Priya. I was just thinking maybe we can ask, since this is a very different representation of the model, to actually
Yeah.
just give people a quick moment to share with us what else jumps to your eyes, as you kind of compare the old pyramid that, of course, we want you to delete from your memory and from any work that you might be doing, and looking at this new model. What else do you notice? What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, Stephanie, for sure. Different shapes instead of the pyramid view. So there's a circle, there's some rectangles, a bigger rectangle. Shashila, oh, plan, do, check, act. I like that. Yeah. Level 3 appears multi-layered. Absolutely. Yeah, Melody. Very true.
I
Ina
love what
does
Ina is
look a
saying.
little bit more complicated. Yeah, it's easy to love what looks simple and feels like, hey, I can do this easily. And
Yeah,
also, I have everything in my control in
yeah,
that. Here, there might be a few things which are not directly in my
yeah.
control.
But
Agnes, that's an interesting observation. There's a double arrow between level 3 and 4. Any quick thoughts on why that might be? Anybody who'd like to talk about why there might be this double-sided arrow between um, 3 and 4. Arnab, are you responding to the level 3 does not happen without drivers to the double-sided arrow, or is that your observation from the image?
No, it's the observation. So
Yeah. Stephanie
yeah.
says it's not one way, need to monitor and adjust the behaviors intended. Absolutely. And I love Ashley's observation of level 1 and 2 are stacked together, but not level 3 and 4. Double arrow is a feedback loop, Jason. Agree with you. Interdependent relationship between the two levels. Yes, indeed, that's what it is. Sarah, all of you are really thinking about it in the right way. Level 4 is an outcome of level 3. If level 3 is happening in the right way, level 4 should be occurring. If level 4 is not happening, then maybe we need to monitor and adjust this gold box that some of you have noticed to say, hey, what's going on? Why are our metrics not shifting? Is it that there is something on the job that is preventing our participants to apply the learning? Is it that they need a little bit more practice? Is it that they've forgotten some of the things that they needed to learn? Or is it that they just don't feel that anybody cares whether I apply the behavior or not? So a lot of this monitor and just needs to happen between levels 3 and 4, to make sure that behavior change happens. And as a result, the leading indicators happen. The reason level 1 and 2 don't have a double-sided arrow with level 3 is just because behavior is not happening. We can't go back to the tried and untested thing that we always did of sending people back to training. We've all had situations where people have come back to training again and again, and nothing's changed. People have gone back to the job and behaviors haven't changed, metrics haven't changed. Very often the issue lies here at the level 3 and 4, saying something on the job is preventing them from applying that learning that they had. And that particularly is true when you have actually evaluated level 1 and 2 well. If you found that participants found the content to be very relevant and they were happy with the program, And at level 2, they actually were feeling confident. They had a lot of commitment. They thought it was all worthwhile with their attitude. And then behaviors are not changing. That means it wasn't such a training issue. There is something on the job that is causing a problem. And being aware of that and looking out for those is where you're doing your monitor and adjust. And that is one of the reasons why level 1 and 2 are stacked together. Level 1 and 2 can happen more or less simultaneously as the training initiative is occurring, and immediately after, levels 1 and 2 do occur. As they go back on the job, level 3 occurs in terms of behaviors changing. And as a result of behaviors changing a little later is when you'll start to see your leading indicator shifting, eventually impacting the mission statement. Level 1 and 2, which is why, is a good idea to also think about, can we do it sort of more formative in that as I'm running a program, can I check very quickly with people how they're feeling? Are they finding the content to be relevant? Can I check on their knowledge, skills, attitude, confidence, commitment, so that I can make changes on the go? I can make changes to the program very quickly so that they feel like they've got enough information and they have the right knowledge to go back and apply it on the job. If I wait only till the end of training, I might not be able to make those adjustments very quickly, and I might lose out on an opportunity to use the data that I'm getting from the evaluation. The other benefit of doing some amount of formative level 1 and 2 is that I save some resources. So I can actually use the resources that I saved by doing more level 1 and 2 formative on doing things that I want to do at level 3 and then measure level 4 as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the Kirkpatrick model. It has all these different elements, and I'm glad that you caught most of them and you're looking at it in different ways. We will spend some time more talking about this green circle and the circle around it. But for now, Melanie.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is the actual visual we hope that you are going to actually steal. And I'm really saying that. I really would love for you to steal this. I'm happy to
Take
send it to
pictures
you.
of it.
Take pictures of it, so that you can change the Google algorithm and kind of make that wrong image disappear. I am still very shocked because just a couple of weeks ago, I came across, a professor that did research and evaluation, and even he still used that old model. And it just kind of puzzles me because actually the model has been around for almost 15 years, the way it is.
Yeah.
I started my journey in evaluation with the Kirkpatricks close to 15 years ago, and that's when this model already existed. But somehow, I guess, bad PR, that other one just kind of seems to be more dominant. So take this. But now let's talk a little bit more about how to really use it. Because also, as some of you have said in the chat, that old model just kind of seemed easy. Yeah, it kind of seemed like, more simple. But in this case, simple is not so good because it actually didn't really help people to really measure the impact of their programs. So here are a couple of pointers from our side, what to keep in mind to really use the Kirkpatrick model right, since that's also the title of our webinar. And the first one is going back to this concept of starting with the end in mind. So when we are in the planning phase, especially, that's what's important. When someone is coming to us with a request for a training, that's when the starting with the end in mind is so crucial. As we said now a few times, Kirkpatrick is more than just evaluation. And evaluation is not what happens at the end of a program. Evaluation is actually something that should kind of be embedded in our full way of dealing with any new requirements. I started my career in IT, and it's still puzzling me. I mean, IT, if some of you also have experience there, I mean, you're not going to start developing some crazy software without being fully clear on the requirement. But somehow in training, we love to do that. We love to somehow do that. Business comes to us and says, hey, we need a communication skills program. And there we go. And I plead guilty as well. We get uber excited as designers and say, oh, yeah, communication skills. Just came across a fantastic model, came across some fantastic role plays and case studies and games, and we jump right into the design without really clarifying the requirement. And that's dangerous because if we don't start with the end in mind, if we don't slow down in really clarifying why we need a training, the chances are that we actually solve the wrong problem. Give you just two quick examples, from recent projects. Uh, One is a client that came to us and wanted a training on customer service, and they wanted people to become better at handling customer complaints. Well, yeah, it would be a pretty easy thing to say, okay, let's jump right in and do a customer service handling complaints training. But when we actually kind of started with the end in mind and went digging deeper into why do you need that? What's currently happening? Asking just a few simple questions like, how did the idea of training come about? What problem does the training, need to solve? We actually found out that they had a change in process, and the process has added multiple loops in their customer service program. And people are now waiting much longer on the call to actually get a representative to handle their inquiries. So by the time someone actually picks up the phone and deals with the customer is already pretty angry, not because the person has done a bad job, just because the process has led to that. So is training the solution here? You can maybe do something around handling, angry customers, but maybe you don't have angry customers if you fix the process. And so starting with the end in mind is actually also preventing us from actually offering training when training is not the intended kind of solution. Give you another quick example of a client that came to us where they had an issue with their new sales associates. And their conclusion was, oh yeah, we need an onboarding program because, these people are just not performing after onboarding. And actually, they're also leaving very fast. And that's when we kind of started going, oh, they're leaving fast. Let's dig deeper. Maybe, okay, maybe onboarding, but what else is going on? Turns out, long story short, the problem was not at all with the sales associates. It was actually with their supervisors who were not giving them the required support afterwards. And so in the end, yes, we needed training, but training for the supervisors on how to actually support people after the onboarding. So that's just a couple of examples, especially also I hear so many organizations telling us training budgets are limited. Well, you do want to make sure that those limited budgets are indeed used where there is a training, a training requirement. So the main reason why we want to start with the end in mind is so that we actually ensure we indeed have a training problem that we can solve. We are fixing the right challenge. So that just kind of as a thing here. Now, there's another aspect of how we can look at that, and that is actually to design with the end in mind. So one is to start with the end in mind, which is all about ensuring that we indeed are solving the right problem. But then it's also about designing with the end in mind, because if we don't keep that in mind, a lot of things can go wrong. But before I tell you more about that and give you a few examples, I'd like to get you again a little bit involved. And just kind of reflecting back on what I shared about the importance of starting with the end in mind. What do you feel you can actually do in your current position to start programs with the end in mind? What does this require from you? What do you maybe need to do in your work, in your everyday interactions, when people come to you with training requests? Just going to give you a moment to think about this. What do you feel you can actually do to start with the end in mind? Yeah. Yeah, I love what's coming in. Even just as simple as, yeah, ask questions. The question, though, to you, Christine, is what kind of questions? Because I think that's where we sometimes fall short. It's what kind of questions we are asking. Yeah. And even there, Sashila, when we talk about training needs analysis, sometimes I would actually just remove that word training and really just say needs
Needs
analysis, because maybe we
analysis.
don't need training. Maybe training is not part of the solution at all. As I told you in the example of the process that changed, there was no training needed. And if we already go in with that mindset of clarifying the training need, I would say we need to validate first if we have a training challenge. Do we have actually a gap in knowledge and skills? In all these level 2 aspects that Preeti shared with you, because then training does indeed become part of the solution. Yeah. Yeah. And really kind of then looking into, and I think that's what's key. We got to go away. I see a lot of people I work with on this having very quickly conversations around the content. So going very quickly into, so what content should be included? What's the duration of the training? How many participants? We get into all these logistical elements, and that's what we want to ban at that moment, and kind of elevate that conversation to level 4 to really say, so what is happening in the business that has prompted this request? What is currently going on that's maybe challenging? Yeah. So really going away from the content and the training discussion. Yeah. Yeah, Arnab, absolutely. What does good look like? That's actually a beautiful kind of transition question into kind of designing with the end in mind. Once we have validated that we indeed have a level 4 business challenge that we can address with training, we then, of course, want to work our way backwards and now start asking questions. Okay, so what is it that the participants are supposed to be doing differently, or as a result of having attended a program, what does success look like? What does good look like? Because that then will help us to actually design with the end in mind. And that is that we really kind of keep the desired behavior in mind, and kind of work towards that. Why is designing with the end in mind so important? Have you ever been in a program, or have you yourself ever designed a program that had way too much content in it? Does that sound like a challenge that sometimes happens or not? If it happened to you, feel free to give me a thumbs up, even virtually, or a yes in the chat. Yeah, agree. Exactly. And that is if we actually don't have that clear end destination. Yeah? If we don't design with the end in mind, it becomes very difficult to decide what to pack into the training content. It becomes very difficult to decide, is this a must have or is this just a nice to have? And this becomes especially important in programs around, let's say, for example, leadership skills. There are so many different things around leadership skill that we could pack in a program. But if we have clearly defined what we want people to do as a result of having attended a program, if that level 3 behavior is clear, the entire design can then support on how to achieve that. Whereas if that is not clear, we are going to say, oh, maybe I need a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and a little bit of that. And we have way too much content in the program that is actually not supporting what we are designing for. So that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind, if we kind of think about that. Yeah, we need to really, really be clear where we are going. What is it that we want people to do as a result, so that we can actually chunk the content, uh, choose the content that is really required to help achieve that. Great. But of course, Kirkpatrick is not only about design and kind of the planning before, it is also about evaluation. It is an evaluation model. But value must first be created before it can be demonstrated. And that's another big kind of challenge a lot of people have when it comes to evaluation. They design a program and then they start evaluating, and all of a sudden they're all surprised that they might not see the results that they were hoping for. Does that sound familiar, Preeti?
Very familiar, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, here are some statistics, and this is by Rob Brinkerhoff, who has done a lot of work in the field of transfer and training impact. And there's been multiple studies that he has done around, whether level 3 is actually going to happen. And what he has found out across multiple studies is that, in average, only about 15% of training graduates will actually do what they've learned in training when they get back to the job. So, what I mean here is, we might have started with the end in mind. We might have designed the program with the end in mind, but there's still one very important ingredient missing for us to actually see the desired results. And that is that, unfortunately or luckily, I'll leave that to you to judge, training will always just be a very small piece of the solution. Because when there's a performance issue, typically about 70% of the time, it's something in the work environment. So it's typically something else going on. If we are only doing the training and then we let people go off to their work environment, yes, we can do all the evaluation we want afterwards. But I'm going to bet you a lot of money that you're probably not going to see the evaluation results you were hoping for. Because we got to remember, when Preeti showed you that Kirkpatrick model, behavior, all those required drivers, we got to think about how to support our learners back on the job. Only then do we maybe have a chance to actually gather evaluation data that's going to put indeed a big smile on our face and the face of our stakeholders. But I guess, Preeti, you'll tell us a little bit more about how we actually do that. What are those drivers that we can possibly use?
Absolutely. Remember, I was talking about that sending of the 60, 90-day survey later and hoping to see results? Well, Melanie's slide just showed us that we are probably not going to see very good results. We're not going to see great behavior change because we haven't done anything to set the participants up for success. And that is why Kirkpatrick is an evaluation model, but it is also a design model, in that it forces you to think before you deliver even the training program. What can we do to support the participants once they've gone back to the job? So this discussion is being had with the supervisors, with the leaders. What is it that you are going to do that will help participants actually change their behavior on the job? Now, there's different elements to it, and we'll talk about it. So that green circle that you had in the Kirkpatrick model, it was surrounded by that little thinner circle of required drivers, and required drivers could be categorized under 4 different subsections. One is reinforce. Reinforce is all about, you gave them some learning, you gave them some input. Now, the forgetting curve is a real thing. People can forget. It's important to help refresh their memories a little bit. So when you send them something a week later, 10 days later, what you are doing is you are helping reinforce their knowledge. So whether it is through job aids that you're sending them, or you are giving them some little e-learning modules to go through, or you're creating some sort of a work review checklist, all of those are ways of reinforcing learning. Reinforcing is also something which is very often very much in our control. So we spend sometimes a lot of time doing reinforcing and not focusing too much on the other elements that we'll talk about. So reinforcement is important, it's great, but it's not the only thing we should rely on. We should try and have a mix of them all. So the other element is encourage. So do participants feel encouraged to try different things? So are we giving them the right feedback? Can we make sure that there is some sort of coaching or mentoring set up with them post, when they've gone back to the flow, they're trying to starting to try out behaviors, and they're floundering a little bit, they are struggling a little bit. So somebody is helping them along the way, coaching them along the way, or mentoring them and giving them feedback. AI coaching is a new thing, which is more and more popular. We could have even elements of that as part of encouragement. It's also important that when somebody does something good, they feel rewarded in some ways. They feel like, yes, there is some benefit in it for me to actually apply these behaviors. So reward doesn't necessarily always just mean a money element to it. It doesn't necessarily always mean a salary hike. It could be, you could be creative about how you want to reward people. anything and everything from gamification to special privileges, like maybe having access to the executive dining room for a month afterwards, or having some sort of an award ceremony, or having their name flashing on the shop floor. Various ways in which you can reward people, giving them the tickets to the latest movie or game that's out there. Any and all of those are actually great rewards. In fact, video games use this reward mechanism in an excellent way. Also do programs like Duolingo, where you're trying to learn a language and you're constantly getting some rewards, so you keep on doing it. Similar thing that we can do to reward our participants as well. And then there is this other piece of accountability where a little bit more of the monitoring comes in. Like for the participants to realize that somebody actually cares and somebody's actually looking out to see whether they're actually changing those behaviors on the job or not. Because otherwise, it's so easy to think that nobody's looking out, so whether I do anything or not, it doesn't matter. But having a good accountability package through either some sort of an action learning, or having a dashboard where you're tracking how behaviors are changing, or doing some surveys, or linking it to their KPIs, or even self-monitoring is a very valid way of monitoring. So it is important that you do some monitoring as well. And a good required driver package is a good mix of all of these four elements and not just any one element. So that's useful. So Melanie's posted a question for you saying, what drivers are you already using? Or what drivers could you perhaps start using? And this is a list. This is not an all-inclusive, comprehensive list. So if you do something which is outside of this list to help encourage or reward or reinforce or monitor your participants, would love to see those as well. So please share your answers in chat as to which you think you could start using or which you're already using as encouragement, reward, reinforce, or accountability packages. While the answers are coming in chat, Melanie, I did want to check with you. Are there any which are your favorite, or are there things that you think are good required drivers, and which do you see most often, really?
Yeah, it's not that I have a total preference. I think what's really key, and I think that's another aspect, why, yes, we want to make sure that a good driver package is kind of very comprehensive and touches on all of them. I also do believe, and that's another thing to keep in mind to use a Kirkpatrick model right, it's, to really put the driver package together according to what problem you're trying to solve. So if not every program has to be treated the same way. So sometimes at the end of a program, when we do an evaluation and we especially kind of focus on their confidence level or commitment level to apply, and we might find out certain barriers there, barriers where they say, well, this was just too much, Well, that's an indication that maybe reinforcement is needed. But maybe they talk about, well, I'm just not really motivated. I'm not really sure this is really worth it. Then maybe more the monitor or the reward and encouragement becomes important. So I think it's also very crucial that we adjust our driver package based on the actual challenge we might, the participants might be having. But I do I do think, especially with technology advances, I do like drip feeds quite a bit. I think there's some really cool stuff you can do out there with technology to just kind of extend the learning way longer. But I'm also a very big fan of getting, supervisors involved. I think that is just so crucial. We just know from research that supervisors are key. And so kind of trying to reduce, not only rely on those drivers that I can do, but actually really, I mean, I'm going to talk about that later, creating that culture of evaluation where you're involving others in the business as well and make them part of the driver package.
Yeah, I so agree. And supervisors often are the make or break link between whether a learning initiative is successful or not, is what I found as well. Because if they feel that they are themselves going to benefit with the participants changing behaviors, they are going to make sure that they provide the support. But if they feel this is going to be added work for me, it's not going to be useful for me, They're not gonna. So I think one of the best practices that I followed was to, as much as possible, make connections, build bridges with the supervisors and the line managers so that they can help my initiative go forward. That was something that really worked well for me in the past.
So
Great.
what do you
All
think,
right.
Preeti? Should we just kind of do another quick poll? I know it's a little bit of a trick question, but that's the other poll I was just really curious to
Yeah.
get people start on before we start slowly wrapping this up. I know you've given us just now a beautiful thing around the drivers, but shall we just check based on everything we shared what they think about this question?
Let's check.
Ah, okay, lots of voting going on. I give another 10 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to close the poll.
Drum roll for level 3.
We do start with level 4, did we say? But yeah, you want to tell us
Yeah.
more about, do we agree with that?
I agree with the level 3 being the most important. I so agree. Let me talk about that a little bit. Level 1 is often the least important. And we're not saying don't do level 1. Please don't mistake us. We're not saying that at all. Level 1 gives us great data in checking whether participants find the program to be relevant, they're happy with it, they enjoy it, all of that or not. Whether that's happening or not, reactions are important. That's why I do a lot of it formative so that you can make course corrections very quickly along the way. If you do need to do it for audit or other purposes, do a formal full level 1 reaction, but don't spend way too much time on it because it's in our control. That's why we spend a lot of time on it. Learning, well, this one is important one. It's also important to make sure that the bridge is connected between level 2 and 3. And like we discussed earlier, the confidence, the commitment, all of those pieces is where the attitude is where the bridges are being made. To make sure that participants feel like they can actually apply the learning on the job will help you take it to the next level. Now, behavior, we are saying, and we are not afraid at Kirkpatrick, we're not shy to say this, we do feel this is the most important level simply because what it does is it allows participants to take all this beautiful learning they've had and apply it on the job and say, hey, I can do something different because I feel supported, I feel encouraged, I feel rewarded, I'm able to do things different. So spend time and effort in thinking about what your required driver package will be. Make sure that level 3 behaviors are very clearly laid out. Spend time and effort. Because level 4, while it's important, it is an outcome. It happens if level 3 happens. If level 3 doesn't happen, level 4 is not going to show too much. So it is useful, important, incredibly necessary that you spend a lot of your time and effort on level 3 behavior. Now, this is something, thank you, everybody. Great comments on there. And yes, I love working with Melanie because of her enthusiasm. So great.
Well, I have to say, as I said, I was just so excited to bust some of these myths. I get a
Yeah.
little bit over passionate about this, but, just yesterday as well, we talked about, how much effort, like I hear people always saying, but how do I do that? We don't have budgets. And
Yeah.
then I look at where they're spending their money and I see them spending so much money on these pre and post tests and satisfaction surveys and venues and beautifying their slides. Don't get me wrong, this is all nice, but it's just not going to drive behavioral change. And so I just don't buy that excuse of not having budget. I think it's really just about refocusing our efforts. Like I think and I know you, Preeti, and I, we talk so much about it. And I know we have some others here in the group who are very passionate about transfer and
Clearly. Yeah.
making this happen. But what do you think? Should we just ask the group one last chat before we kind of bring it all together? in terms of, what do they think is maybe one thing they can do to refocus their energy on level 3? Because
Yeah,
this is really what's required. I mean, evaluation, I always say it's not hard to evaluate level 4. It's just hard
absolutely.
to get the data you want. And what I mean by that, it's hard to design a program in such a way that it really drives behavioral change, that you get those satisfying scores afterwards on level 4 metrics. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a question on chat for you. What is at least one thing you plan to do to refocus your energy on level 3 behavior or on job performance? Would love to hear your answers on that. And while we are checking with people, Melanie, did you have any thoughts on what you do to bring
Yeah.
focus on level 3?
I mean, one thing, I think you mentioned it earlier, and I also, recently wrote quite a bit about it on LinkedIn. It's this formative evaluation at level 1 and level 2.
Mm.
I mean, I do very, very little level 1 and level 2 evaluation after. But just the other day, again, I looked at the evaluation concept of a client, and they spent so much effort in these level 2 evaluations, like 60 days later, where they did elaborate knowledge and skill tests. And I'm
Ooh,
just sitting there. If this is not compliance driven, why would you do that? Like
why? Yeah,
60 days after the training, why would I care about whether people still know it? Like, I'd
yeah.
rather first find out, are they actually using
How are
it?
they? Yeah,
And if they're not using it, then I'm going to dig deeper. So I think, yeah, a key thing is to really use a lot more formative evaluation during the program, and also reduce some of, I mean, I love designing. I'm an instructional designer myself. I love doing it. But to kind of broaden the perspective of the instructional design job, to say it's not only about designing the session. Let me
yeah,
be smart on my resources there, so I can have more resources to design the driver package afterwards, to have those conversations with the business and get their buy-in. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
So we
Yeah. So
wanted, yeah, go ahead, Melanie.
no, tell me.
No, I was just saying, should we just continue and talk to
Yeah.
them about the one key thing?
Absolutely. So kind of just bringing all of this together. We just kind of, we spoke to you now a lot about what does it really take to work with the Kirkpatrick model. Start with the end in mind, focus on the most important level, and that is level 3. But there's a couple of other things, that I just kind of want to touch on. And that is really to not make evaluation optional, make it a requirement. What we mean by that is, so often, evaluation is just kind of more done as a, yeah, it's a nice to have. Well, okay, we'll send a survey maybe at one point. But the thing is, evaluation, if you really want to improve, and if you really want to kind of take action, requirement is not about, evaluation is not about just saying, yay, job well done, we got a whatever score in satisfaction or whatever it is. Evaluation is about taking actions on the data. And you cannot get better at designing programs. You cannot get better at supporting people in applying what they've learned on the job if you don't, if you don't know what actually is working. And so evaluation is not just about ticking that box. Evaluation is really about creating a culture in the organization where we take decisions based on data. We look at programs that we've designed, we look what works, what doesn't work, and we adjust accordingly. Way too often do I just see data being collected and then it just kind of disappears in a drawer, or now it gets stored on the cloud and no action is actually taken on it. And so that's really kind of what we hope, to also kind of get across. Evaluation is not a one-time affair. It's not a one-time affair that you do at one point at the end of the program or 60 days later. Evaluation is an ongoing process. And so we want to create a culture of evaluation in organizations where evaluation constantly happens. We evaluate, during a program, how people respond, whether it's relevant, so we can adjust accordingly. Then we keep monitoring on the job so that we can see whether things are happening. But most importantly, when things are happening, we want to dig deeper and finding out why are they happening, so that we can learn from that and develop success factors out of that. But also when things are not happening the way they are, that's great. I get so many clients telling me, oh my God, my evaluation data is not meeting expectations. That's great. I mean, don't get me wrong. Of course, it's not perfect, but what it means is you can take action on it. You have actionable data. You can dig deeper into why is it not, meeting expectations. And you might find out, barriers to implementation, flaws in the design that you can then correct. And so what it really takes, and I think what I've seen also together with Preeti and other Kirkpatrick colleagues, evaluation is not something that you learn once. It's really evaluation, especially in today's world, it kind of keeps changing. So it's very important to also stay connected to trends. The evaluation business has undergone, that's what I mean. So many people that still think this pyramid is the Kirkpatrick model because we don't keep ourselves updated on how things evolve. And I think that is really something that you can do now as well, is to actually make sure you're doing it right at your organization, that you ban that old image and that you kind of spread that message, what the Kirkpatrick model really is, and that it is about starting with the end in mind and that focus on level 3. And I think what I just really realized, sometimes people get overwhelmed because yes, it is a lot to evaluate, but not every program needs to be evaluated up to level 4, by the way. That's another misconception. Only programs that have the potential to have a strategic impact. And for others, you can maybe scale down also some of the efforts. But maybe also it's about asking, using the Kirkpatrick model to really look at all your training offerings and asking yourself, do we really need all these programs? Are they actually contributing to the higher goals of the organization? Because if they are strategic and important, you will get the required support to make things happen. But when programs are just being pushed out by L&D because we somehow feel it's important, we are kind of in love with a certain model that we want to push, it's also normal that we might not get the required support from the higher levels. Yeah? So now, as a conclusion, how to do the Kirkpatrick, right? Here, kind of 4 key messages that we hope you can leave with. The end is the beginning, be it to kind of clarify the requirement, but also keep that end in mind when designing. Value must be created before it can be demonstrated. Without the required transfer mechanism and driver package, your training is probably going to go waste. There's going to be a lot of scrap learning. That's why focus on the most important levels. Try and see how you can maybe put some of the resources that are currently in design and other elements, put them into that post-program support, because that's where the value gets created. And create a culture of evaluation where evaluation data is utilized, where it's shared, it's analyzed, and action is actually taken based on it. So that is kind of it from our side. And in a moment, Preeti and I will be happy to stay back for questions. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn and reach out. But in those final 2 minutes, I do want to show you, in the spirit of level 3, I want to show you a couple of things that you could maybe do to actually keep your learning alive over the next couple of weeks, months, hopefully years. And the first one is, so what's next? We as a community at Kirkpatrick Partners, we are here to support you. There's loads of things that are happening right now that for people who really want to upskill in this field, where you can get access to. And one is the Kirkpatrick community. This is a really new thing and it's very exciting. The Kirkpatrick Partners have launched a community. If anyone is interested, just go and Google. It's there's lots of events happening, but it's also asynchronous where you can ask, evaluation questions and get support and answers from people from across the world. There's also a toolkit, so kind of like, the driver package about, kind of providing resources, templates. So there's loads of resources available, again, with the Kirkpatrick Partners. So maybe once go to their website, kind of scroll around and see whether you can find something that you could actually use. Loads of templates, survey templates, and so forth. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people out there who've been using the model for a long time in the correct way and are more than happy to share that. There's, of course, also from our side, we are, and you're going to get possibly a follow-up email with the recording. We have a couple of sessions left until the year end, and we have a special year-end sale for our virtual bronze and silver programs. We have face-to-face programs as well happening in Singapore. So if you are interested in diving deeper into this and really learning how to use the model, this might also be something to be interested in. And last but not least, we do know that AI is a big topic right now, and we spoke about keeping ourselves updated on trends. Well, we are doing that as well at Kirkpatrick Partners, and there's an exciting free webinar coming up by Vanessa, the owner of Kirkpatrick, which is all about Kirkpatrick and AI. So how to leverage artificial intelligence in evaluation. There's so much happening. We're experimenting quite a bit on how to really use AI for evaluation. So I know it's not the most convenient time for everyone. It is a little bit more US friendly, but we might do a retake afterwards for the APAC zone as well. So yeah, that is kind of it from us. So more than happy to stay back. I know we are kind of over the time, so apologies for that. We do hope, though, that you kind of found it engaging and interesting and thought-provoking. We know we didn't give you all the answers, but there was one key thing we wanted to get across, and that is this. That pyramid is not the Kirkpatrick model. There is a new model out there, and there are a couple of things to keep in mind to use it correctly. Yeah, so if there's any questions, feel free to shoot them out. If we don't get to answer all of them, we'll go through the chat and kind of provide an answer to them offline. You can also reach out to us online, and we'll do our best to answer everything. Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for being so engaged and putting in such lovely answers in chat.